Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and Juma Mubarak. We are definitely starting to make our moves toward wintertime as we are seeing our cold weather coming back in. We're very excited about today's medically based Khatera. So, Brother, we'll be talking about the blessings of COVID. I know we often think about the negatives of this pandemic, but mashallah, today he's going to focus on the blessings of COVID and the lessons he's learned regarding the most important blessing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us from this pandemic. And then after the Khatera, Dr. Mariam Mahmud, who will be discussing integrated health for today's Muslims during our CLD portion of the program. This will be a brief talk discussing the field of integrative medicine and its connections to healthy living in the context of Muslim life, and some guidance during the time of COVID and the pandemic. So, mashallah, this is all very relevant, very important for today's world. I love seeing all the faces on our screens today, mashallah. Everyone knows that's my mantra. So if you don't have your camera on and you can turn your camera on, I know our speakers always really appreciate talking to people, especially during these times. So if you can, that'd be great. Also, just a quick note, during the talk, I will be giving a link to a survey that Mainline Muslims has put out. If you have not responded to the survey yet, please do. We're looking for volunteers. So if you can volunteer just an hour a month, they would really appreciate your help. So inshallah, Hamza, I'm going to turn things over to you and we'll get started.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much. This is great that we're talking about COVID, like Sister Nicole was saying. It's very important at this time. Everyone can hear me? Okay, good. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi nahmaduhu wa nasta'inu wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyati a'malina man yahdillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yadlil fala hadiya lahu. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Praise be to Allah. We seek His help and His forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil of our own souls and from our bad deeds. Whomsoever Allah guides will never be led astray, and whomsoever Allah leaves astray, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, the one having no partner, and I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is His messenger. Whomsoever Allah guides, none can lead him astray, and whomsoever Allah sends astray, none can guide. The truest of word is the book of Allah, and best of guidance is the guidance of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The worst of things are those that are newly invented. Every newly invented thing is an innovation, and every innovation is going astray, and every going astray is in the fire. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Let me just share my screen. Can you guys see this? Great. I hope you like my fancy Mainland Muslim Society stuff. All right, so Jazakallah khair for having me. I was thinking about this yesterday, and I came across. I just figured it out yesterday. Was that there's one core blessing in COVID that many of us may know. I didn't know, but it really got me thinking about life, and I wanted to really share it with all of you. But of course, you don't get a blessing without first going through a little bit of a PowerPoint. So I'm going to be talking about the 4 lessons that I learned during COVID. Many of you may already be practicing this, but as you know, I kind of like doing things more practically. So I hope that I can give everyone a reminder of sorts about this, or maybe even make others think about these lessons as well. So the first lesson is what I believe, and you all may not believe this, is that COVID is a punishment. It's an azab from Allah, an azab to wake us up so that we come closer to Him. A test, so to speak, as well. In the Quran, Allah has said, "Verily, we shall put you to test with some fear and hunger, and with some loss of wealth, lives, and offspring, And O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, convey good tidings to those who are patient, who say when inflicted by hardship, verily we are of God, and verily to Him shall we return. Upon them is the blessings of Allah and His mercy. And what I mean to say from this is that we need to really wake up. I really need to wake up from what has happened in the last year, um, and remind myself, many people who are here before this are no longer here, and they were young, and there were even older individuals. There were people who were doing what we're doing in everyday lives, and a few days later they were not around. So we need to think of this. We need to learn from this and be uh, be mindful of issues we can get if we don't come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this may not be the last punishment. Inshallah, this vaccine will work. And after COVID, something else can pop up as well if the world collectively does not learn that this is something that Allah is testing us with, and that's something that we need to learn from. But along those same lines, a, a, a lesson 1A, for so to speak, is that we should um, understand that this is a punishment and that we have to be careful and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we can't be scared of the virus, so to speak, right? We're not scared of the virus. We're learning from the virus so that way we can get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what I'm trying to say is that we, at the end of the day, are Muslims, and we need to still be dignified and not kind of curl away and not do anything anymore and become hermits and be scared. I'm not saying, especially as a physician, you need to do social distancing, but what I'm trying to say is we can't hide away and not live our lives. Whether this is our new norm or not, we need to live it that way. So I wanted to touch on the story of the elephant, specifically as it relates to the grandfather of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdul Muttalib. When Abraha was bringing the elephants to attack Kaaba, um, the villagers were scared because they saw a huge army, and certainly they didn't know what to do. During that whole journey, Abraha had also captured many different animals in that area. They were pillaging the farms and things like that, and they had also taken about 200 of Abdul Muttalib's animals as well, including camels. So Abdul Muttalib went to meet Abraha. He was the leader of Mecca at that time, and when Abraha saw him, he was very awed by his personality, the way he carried himself. And in fact, Abraha came down and kind of sat next to him in some narrations and kind of discussed the situation together, or thought he would be discussing the situation together. And Abdul Muttalib, uh, he asked him why he was there, and Abdul Muttalib said, "I wanted my camels back." And Abraha was kind of taken aback, and he was like, "Look, I have this huge army, and you're not scared of me and me coming and destroying, the Kaaba and the village and all this stuff. You're coming here you just think about yourself." And Abdul Muttalib became upset with that comment and said, "Look, I'm the owner of these camels, and I want them, and the owner of the Kaaba will deal with you guys how he liked to deal with you guys." And as you guys know, then Ababil came and destroyed the elephants. So the point in this is that we have to act like Abdul Muttalib in this situation, right? We need to not be scared of this virus, but we need to learn how um, to be careful for ourselves and our families, and to get closer to Allah through this process. The second lesson I learned, which we all know anyway, is that we're human, right? And therefore, we should not look down on others. And I'm specifically talking about COVID in this situation, is that, you may be practicing social distancing while your friends may not be, or your families may not be. And sometimes, you can give advice, but many times people don't take advice that well. And if they don't, they don't. You definitely need to protect your family, but we shouldn't look down on others for what they're doing, because uh, it's honestly, it's up to them how they want to deal with these things, and we don't know what situation they're in. And the other part of this is that we're not perfect, right? Just because we are practicing social distancing rules and we're careful and we think that we're never going to get this. Unfortunately, that may not be the case. Inshallah, it is. But no one's perfect. People can do great um, uh, social distancing and being careful and washing hands, but they can still get it if it's meant to be. So what this lesson really says is that, you know, we are at the end of the day human, and therefore we make mistakes. We shouldn't look down on others who make mistakes or who don't understand some of this. It's great to give advice if they listen, but many times people don't. And just remember that, you know, you do the best for yourself and your family, and inshallah, you'll get credit and rewards for that. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu has said, "It is enough evil for a Muslim to look down upon his Muslim brother." So again, to emphasize the fact, we should not look down on each other. The third lesson out of four is that we're part of a community. And you know, in COVID, it's very difficult to remember that. We're doing Zoom sessions. We're not really having in-person meetings. Even your neighbors may be inside the house, social distancing, or you may be doing that, and it separates us from each other. And we should remind ourselves that that's not the case. We still have family and friends that need us. You know, many of them can be sick, uh, and it may be a small gesture to just call them, see how they're doing, even sending care packages. One great thing that I love that I brought up last time too is the way Sister Nicole recommended Zoom dinners, which is I think that's a great idea. You know, to remember that we're still in this together, and we should help the community. You know, when I was sick with COVID, when I was sick, the community around me was great, and it really got me thinking. This is where I learned that lesson, where they texted and they're like, all right, we're going to Trader Joe's. Do you guys need anything? Even, you know, the Mainland Muslim Society board also did the same. So that's very important. Whether the person takes it or not, it does go a long way. You feel supported that someone's there for you. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, help one another in acts of piety and righteousness, and do not assist each other in acts of sinfulness and transgression, and be aware of Allah. Verily, Allah is severe in punishment. So again, you know, let's work together to help each other and assist each other in good things, inshallah. And whoever helps his brother in his time of need, Allah will be there in his time of need. And you know, we all need Allah in our time of need. So if we have the power and the ability to even call, text, or help others, we should try to do that, especially during this time. And finally, I know I've been talking about giving advice, but lesson 4 that I learned was not to give advice. I think giving advice it requires a lot of tactfulness, as many of you know already. And not only that, first you have to have the understanding and the wisdom of it. You have to understanding of why it's happening and what's happening and how it works. And then you need to be tactful in the way you give advice. Just because you have wisdom does not mean you'll be tactful. And you could be an ignorant person. An ignorant person may humiliate, belittle, or even insult someone without even knowing it. And they could be a genius. They could be very smart. They could understand everything there is to do with COVID, for example. But if they don't know how to um, explain it to their friends and families, they may feel hurt. So I myself, but I would recommend everyone else to be careful and think before you consider yourself worthy to give advice on any topic, unfortunately. But giving advice is a great thing, and it's important, and it's part of Islam. So we should all learn how to be tactful in giving it. So what were the 4 lessons that I learned so far? I mean, I've learned a lot more, but these were the 4 that I could really, I thought were the most important. Was that I believe that we need to say what it is. It's a punishment. It's an azab to get us back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to remind us to go back to Him, and start from the beginning. The other thing is, the second lesson is we're all humans and we make mistakes. So we shouldn't look down on others who may, for example, have a wedding party during COVID when they should be social distancing. Um, that may make you upset, which is completely appropriate, but you should not um, talk about them, look down on them, and if possible, if they'll listen, give them some advice. But at the end of the day, we don't know where they're coming from and why they're doing the things they are, and it could be completely valid. So we have to be very careful in the way we talk to others and the way we think. We are a community, so we should help each other in the time of need in any way we can, whether it's calling, texting, etc. And we should really be careful in giving advice without having the wisdom about that topic and the tactfulness to give it. So with those lessons, I was thinking about, I can't just talk about lessons and maybe some negative things and this, talk about punishment and all that without thinking of what the blessings are of COVID. There are many, but I think there's a very core blessing of COVID. And I'm very excited to share with you guys because it's something that we don't have much of. And it kind of comes to this surah. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. By time, indeed, mankind is in loss, except for those who have believed and done righteous deeds and advised each other to truth and advised each other to patience. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about time. We are losing time day by day. We're getting closer to our death, to day of judgment, and we don't have that much time left. If I know, I don't know about you guys, but many people ask me from family and friends, when's COVID going away? It's taking forever. When's the vaccine coming? It's taking forever. I don't remember hearing these kind of things before. It was all about, oh man, time's flying. But now time slowed down. It hasn't really slowed down, but it feels like it. So the core blessing of COVID is actually time, right? Now we have time, depending on the situation. I know many of us may be out of work. Many of us are working in the front lines or busy, but overall, the majority has more time. They're social distancing alone with family. They're getting more involved with family and they have more time to do things, time for prayer. They have time. Many organizations right now are actually thinking of this time as a time where things have paused in the world, where they can re-look at their whole plan, their structure, and reevaluate their future, which they could have never done if time continued to go. They can really go back and think about things. They can save money. Not only companies are saving money by people working at home and other ways, but individuals are starting to save money because they're not going out as much. They're kind of sitting home. Unfortunately, many are out of work, so it doesn't work for everyone, but many are saving as well during this time. And I think this is a time for us to reflect not only on what has happened in the year, but about how we're going to go forward, how we're going to move our family, our community forward. Because one of the sheikhs in Philadelphia, he was talking to me, and he's like, "This is the best. COVID is the best time now. Everything is in pause. Everyone is kind of like sitting around. If, as an organization, if we move forward, we can get so many things done, and so that when COVID does go away or things get modified into a hybrid, we are ready to tackle them in the business world, in the nonprofit world, in our families." So I think this is the biggest blessing we have right now. We have a lot more time than we've had in the past, and I think we should try to take advantage of it, inshallah. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to put in a little plug for Mainland Muslim Society. We are talking about COVID, and great thing is the best advice actually that you guys can give your friends and family is to come to this seminar. You don't have to tell them about COVID. You could just tell them to come to this, and we could talk about some facts related to COVID. We'll keep it short and sweet. And we have Dr. Zia who will answer all the questions. And one of the main questions people are asking now is about the vaccine. So if you can come by Tuesday, 7 p.m., register before you come, because we are going to send out a family guide afterwards to everyone who registers. It would be great to have all of you. So thank you. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد.
MashaAllah. Thank you so much, Hamza. You hit on some of my big mantras. Community. Community is so important. And I think one of the things, as the auntie on the call, as the host on the call, I'm going to give everyone a homework assignment between now and next Friday. Call or text three people that you haven't spoken to in a few months, whether it's family, friends in the community, whomever. Reach out. We all talk to people that we have to talk to. How often do you just pick up the phone and say, you know what, I haven't spoken to Fulana in months. I hope she's doing okay. We think about it, but then we don't do it. I made a conscious effort this week to call some family members that I hadn't spoken to in a while. Some that are not well, some that I just haven't talked to. And it was so rewarding, not only for me, but for them, to be able to call and talk and hear how they were doing and just listen. So it was really, and I have been thinking about it, but I said, I'm thinking about it, I'm just going to do it. So it's really important that we reach out and do those things, especially now. You don't know how someone is struggling or how they are managing during this time when we can't get together in person. It's not, relationships are not just because they're easy. We have to make an effort to keep those relationships. So, and you'll take the barakah for them. So 3 people, inshallah, and then I'll look for a raise of hands next Friday, inshallah. I see some new faces on our call today, and I'm so excited, mashallah. I love when I see new faces, whether it's just a picture or it's a name or it's actual faces. And I see some people that are here with us, tried and true, every week. So mashallah, thank you all for joining us. I'm going to turn this over to Mariam now, who's going to give the flip side of the COVID piece and do her community learning and dialogue segment. So Mariam, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister Nicole and Brother Hamza. Can you hear me okay? So I'm going to try to see if I can share some pictures. They're not that important, just something to look at as I talk. I'm not as savvy as Brother Hamza. I'm sort of figuring Zoom out a little bit. So I'm really appreciative that I can be a part of this, and I was invited. It's such a great community, and really there are really incredible practitioners and community members that I've been listening to. So I think this kind of goes along with a lot that's been discussed over the last several weeks. So let me see if I can share first, if you can bear with me. Okay, let's see. Sorry, one second, I'm going to try. If it doesn't work, that's not a big deal. Yeah, I don't know. Looks like some other pictures are coming up. Let's see. We'll try. If you see a picture that doesn't belong, that's okay. So that's my first screen. I'm going to start with a little bit of a, can you guys all see that? If you could maybe just say yes. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an exercise that I think is an incredible tool. The reason I start with this is because, just like prayer and our intention in prayer, a lot of times if we begin with sort of a practice where we sort of quiet down our minds, our busy days, our bodies, we can really learn tools that can help us with health, both in our day-to-day, but also in times that are challenging. So this is called a 4-7-8 breath, and I'd like to see if we can begin with that. What it does is it gives us a way to kind of control voluntarily a process in our bodies, the breath, both voluntarily and the involuntary parts of breath that kind of help us regulate the autonomic nervous system, bring down the fight or flight response, and bring up the parasympathetic nervous system. So just like you see in this little image, you will sit kind of straight. If you can lower your gaze a little bit and say Bismillah, that's usually how I start it, and kind of exhale to kind of let out a breath with your belly if possible. So it's kind of a form of diaphragmatic breathing, which many of you may know about. And then start with an inhale for the count of 4. I'll use my fingers. So we're going to take a deep breath in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kind of hold your belly and hold that breath for a count of 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then exhale out, kind of loud if you can, and let all that air out for a count of 8. So a long exhale. And ideally from your stomach. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we're going to try that one more time. So you're going to take a breath in, Bismillah, inhale for a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold that for a count of 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And exhale that out for a count of 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And if you do that, I think you find that you kind of, if you practice that, I do it twice a day, sometimes after or right before Fajr, and then at night when I'm trying to go to sleep. It really does bring down sort of all those things in our mind that are going, all the worries. I know when I come to Jummah, there's usually a kid on me or I'm rushing to Zoom in, and it's kind of a nice way to reset. And I think brings us kind of to the way that we pray and the way that we intend on doing the things that we do. So one of the quotes that, I don't know if I can switch my picture. I guess I'll just say it. Let's see. Okay, you can see that now. So the breath in Islam, I think, is really, in many cultures, it's considered like an anchor, right? It bridges our inner worlds and our outer worlds, our bodies and our minds. And in the Quran, in this surah, it says, "And Mary, the daughter of Imran, who preserved her chastity, then we breathed therein of our spirit, and she confirmed the words of her Lord and his books, and she was among the devoutly obedient." Sort of speaking about breath a little bit more. And then a Sufi, there's a quote that the Holy Quran, in addition to all the other things that it is also a set of breathing practices. And I think it's really a lovely way to look at how we, with something so simple, we can kind of control our bodies and our minds. And I think that's really a big theme in what I do and I believe in terms of the way I practice medicine. And so that's the 4-7-8 breath. I hope that you'll practice it, and I'll put in a link at the end if you'd like to kind of do it again. It's very easy to find. So just a little bit about myself. I am a pediatrician, a mom to 4, a community member, and your sister. And I had been practicing for about 10 years in a pretty busy practice that I loved, and found that my body, call it Allah, I do feel it was like a message to me, and sort of goes along with, I think, what Brother Hamza was saying, was really a sign that I wasn't doing well after a while. I wasn't feeling well. I had headaches. My body hurt. I was looking for diagnoses to figure out what was wrong. Sorry. I thought this was addressed to my little girl. But I found that in addition to not feeling well, I felt like I needed to pivot and take a break. And I think a lot of us are finding that with COVID, that we're finding that these breaks and these periods are really informative to us if we just listen. And so after 10 years of practice, I took a sabbatical time, and then COVID hit. And around right before, I had been looking for something that spoke to me better about the way I practice medicine. I found I was relying on pharmaceuticals more and more for things that were really what I consider to be common things, right? Like our stresses, our anxieties, depression, focus, things in kids that you would hope that we could address in other ways as a society, as a people and our families, but really for whatever reasons, I needed to rely more on medication. And so I looked for something else. And that's when I came upon integrative medicine. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is, and hopefully leave you with some tips that you can use in your day-to-day, because really my goal is to say, number one, this is not against conventional medicine. I think conventional medicine is an incredible field, and it has done so much for us, right? In terms of vaccines, in terms of antibiotics, pasteurization, right? We've come so far. Our life expectancy has improved by 30 years in just the 20th century. So it has a great and important place. This is sort of Another way to look at especially illnesses where I think it's kind of left us a little bit, the preventative care, the lifestyle that we lead, and how often that leads to most of our chronic illnesses like depression, anxiety, even cancers, even metabolic disease like heart disease and diabetes. Often there's a root cause that we're not quite able to address as well as we could. And that's where this field comes in. It was founded in about 1994, and now it's quite popularized, and it's in a lot of medical schools and in fellowship programs. And some of the principles that I think are important to think about and also relate to our beautiful religion, Islam, is that the patient and the practitioner are partners in the healing process, that all factors influence health, including wellness, disease, and we should take them into consideration, like the mind, the spirit, the community, as well as the body. That there's an appropriate use of both conventional and alternative methods to facilitate the body's innate healing response, that effective interventions are natural, and if they're less invasive, they should be used whenever possible. And I think that goes to sort of like the gifts that Allah has given us, right, in our environments, in our innate healing capacity. That integrative medicine neither rejects conventional medicine nor accepts alternative therapies without criticism, without evidence. That good medicine is based in science, that it's inquiry driven and open to new paradigms. And along with the concept of treatment, there are broader concepts of health promotion, of prevention of illness, and these are paramount. And that practitioners of integrative medicine should exemplify those principles. So I hope that I can do that. So I'm going to talk now about kind of how Islam looks at health. And the Islamic perspective on health is one that looks at health as an equilibrium, that our organs are in harmony with one another and not in struggle, that the two aspects of our human being are united, the material aspect, the physics of our body, and the immaterial ones, our souls, and that we are of sound intellect and sound heart. And it also includes social dimensions, like were mentioned by Sister Nicole and Brother Hamza, like the social dimensions that are relational, that we're serving, and that we're part of community. And so really the two group really nicely. And for me, learning about this way of looking at medicine really comes home to, I think, who we are as Muslims. And I think I'm going to go through some of the sort of parts of health that we look at in integrative medicine. So sort of bullet point, different concepts like meditation and prayer, like diet, which I think is so important for every day, exercise, sleep, and chronic stress, and what it does to our bodies and how we can sort of tackle them. And I think in essence, deal with COVID in a preventative fashion. So I won't be talking about vaccines or the medications that you may get when you're in the hospital, but what we can do now at home. And I would say, number one, that most of us do some of these things and have always learned about them. But I think the actual tools of how to practice them can often be very difficult. And so I think that's what I hope, is that you come away with a couple bits. And I think the other big thing is that everything is synergistic. So when we fix or improve one thing, then we are often fixing a lot of other things. And I think that's really important to know about the way we see our bodies and medicine. I'm just gonna share another image. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about meditation and what it does for our mind, our body, and our spirit. And I think what meditation means in terms of our prayer too. The ability to kind of quiet our mind and sort of hone in on parts of ourselves. And learn to sort of like bring down that fight or flight response, right? So on meditation, there is, Imam Walid says, the most virtuous form of devotion is contemplative reflection, and the best of that is annihilation of the self, which is the supreme station. So in terms of that, I think that, I think one of the best things that I learned is after I pray, I often will sit quietly for sometimes 3 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes, the longer the better. But with time, I've kind of really learned to sit with myself in quiet. And I find that my prayer has enhanced so much more. It's not just a quick rush in to do that 5 times a day, but it's one that's more mindful, more focused. And I find that it kind of trickles out in how we deal with our families, our work. And we're not as task oriented, but our brains actually function better. And studies have really shown that. So I think that is one thing that we can do to maybe, something to try possibly, or even to enhance the quiet parts of your prayer, whether you're sitting in zikr or you're, whichever way that you choose to spend that time. I think it can be really helpful. And there are also really evidence-based methods of doing that, like programs like MBSR, which really teach us how to do that. And we've known that for a lot of history. So I think that is definitely something worth kind of learning more about. Second, I'd like to talk a little bit about diet, because I think that really is a big part of how we heal ourselves, but just being food as medicine, and how that can be a big part of how we deal with both COVID and as a preventative strategy, and even after you're diagnosed. Because I think one of the things that I think it's important to talk about here is basically the politics of food and the food that we are provided and that's available to us. So the image that I put up is one of the anti-inflammatory diet. It kind of looks a lot like the typical food pyramid, but it's much more nuanced because.
Hold my eye out, sir. You're yummy.
Mariam, I'm sorry, Mariam.
Pure foods. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, back up just a little bit. There was some sort of interference, and we heard something else for just a moment. So go back to where you started on the food pyramid.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Can you see me okay? And you can see the image?
Not the
sorry,
image.
I'm really learning today, right?
That's okay.
So the food pyramid, I'll talk about that in a little more detail, but basically I was talking about the politics of food and how when we really learn about the food that's provided to us, we really realize that between the commercialization of food and the industrialization of food, a lot of the nutritional foods that are provided to us are really depleted of a lot of nutrients, the soil, the pesticides that are used. That whole wheat is sometimes just white processed flour that's kind of more dyed brown, that sometimes like packaged foods, really high sugar, really lacking in nutrients. So the more that we eat sort of healthful foods from what Allah created, those are the foods that are really healing for us and really can be thought of as more medicinal. So in terms of this pyramid, this is one that's touted by a lot of integrative medicine practitioners. It's called the anti-inflammatory diet. It really stresses vegetables and fruits in like high quantities, like 5 to 7 a day. And when we eat more vegetables and fruits, we really get a lot of phytonutrients from them, which are really found to be anti-inflammatory. So they bring down our inflammatory markers. You hear about cytokines a lot with COVID. And those are things in our body that can either support us or that can sometimes be sort of a detriment. And in lifestyles where we're kind of relying more on processed foods, we have more pro-inflammatory cytokines. So fruits, vegetables in high quantities can counter that. So that's the base of the pyramid, right? That whole grains, cracked grains can be very helpful. Pasta, beans. Some of the things that I do that have really changed has been like to eat more fish within the week, because fish has omega-3 fatty acids that can help with brain development, can help counter a lot of chronic disease, even arthritis and joint issues, and is found to help with depression and anxiety. So really the foods that God has provided us can be quite healthy. We know that when we rely on more packaged foods, there's a lot more inflammatory compounds in those, that when we eat more red meat in a week, that also increases our incidences of cancer. There's a lot of evidence to show that. And so the less we rely on those and the more we rely on these good foods and foods from our traditions, really have pretty big impact in terms of health and even our immune function. The next part I wanted to address is exercise. And I think one of the really neat examples of that is prayer. Because in prayer, there is a lot of movement in our prayer, which is pretty incredible. But to actually have a prescription for exercise, I think is really something new and different, right? So the types of exercise that our bodies need can actually also be very supportive for our immune health and preventative for other diseases. So 1/4 of adults don't get enough exercise. 80% of adolescents do not get enough exercise. And what's really prescribed for us is about 60 minutes a day for children. And for adults ages 18 to 54, it's 150 minutes a week. And that's exercise that really have moderate quality, where you're really sweating, bringing up your heart rate for some of that, or at least for 10 minutes of that time a day. And I think that really changes the way we think about movement and what it can do for our health. There are lots of studies that have shown that when we exercise more, it affects our mood, our anxiety, our depression. And many of you who kind of get out and do that probably have found that. And I think that's where I really feel that meditation and that quiet period and thinking about how you feel after you eat healthy, after you eat whole foods from Allah, after you move your body, what does that feel and what does that do for you? And I think that's a really good guide to know why we should do it too. But studies show that after 30 minutes of aerobic exercise, we increase something called brain-derived naturopathic factor, and that has known to decrease anxiety and depression, that immune function goes up, that we improve insulin resistance, stress management is improved, physical and psychological wellness is improved. We obviously improves muscle strength, flexibility, agility, and bone density. And so I think that's those are important things to think about, especially in terms of COVID. And then next I wanted to kind of address stress management. So stress is definitely a big part of our lives. This is hadith that when of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that Tahio shared with me, which is that when one of you becomes angry while standing, he should sit down. And if the anger leaves him, well and good. Otherwise, he should lie down. And it's really that process of sort of quieting down our minds and what, stress can do to our bodies. So I found that when I was pivoting and, thinking of what I should do, so many of the stress factors that I didn't even recognize were there. I really thought of stress as a good thing, that it helped me go, like it was, and those little stresses on the day to day can really be pro-inflammatory. And those effects can compound with each other. So when we have chronic stress, when we have poor nutrition, when we're sedentary, when we don't have great sleep, when there's obesity as a factor, substance abuse, or even social isolation, that all those things can contribute to poor immunity and also more chronic disease. And the ways to counter those are pretty much what we've talked about so far, prayer being one of them, meditation, moving our bodies and exercise, and sleep, which brings me to my next topic. We all know that sleep is really important, right? But what is it about sleep that can be so healing? So the benefits of sleep can be with memory, they can help with our attention, they lower stress, it can help with weight, keeps us healthy in terms of our immune system, and and even improves creativity. So an important thing that I learned about sleep is that when we don't have good restful sleep that includes REM sleep, even studies have shown that the next day, our brain reactivity is different. We're less able to handle the stresses of our day-to-day lives when we don't have good sleep. And so I think it's important to think of strategies to improve that. And thinking about COVID, one of the supplements that some of you may have heard about in the news is melatonin, which is a nice supplement, and I would say safe for children and the majority of people. Of course, if you have any health concerns or if you're on medications, check with your physicians. But melatonin is a nice strategy to both help with sleep, but also the oncology and cancer literature has shown that it can help with immune function. So that could be a strategy that you might use, especially in the days of COVID. And then some other things that I think can be helpful. This is just a webinar series, and I'm sure it'll be a nice supplement in addition to the one that's coming up that I think you should definitely tune into. This one talks more about these preventative approaches to COVID-19. So I found a quote that I really loved, and I thought I would share with you at the end. And it's from, her name is Sundos Kolaki, and she was a hospital chaplain. And I just really kind of found this to be a really sweet way to look at sort of our Islamic life and health. But she says, I realize that between Muslims, prayers are woven into the tapestry of a conversation. It becomes a fluid exchange of a prayer for you, a prayer for me. I have so much pain. May God grant you peace and grant you peace. Muslims weave prayer into at least 5 gaps of the day, so eventually the lines between prayer time and living time are blurred, transforming the mundane into the spiritual. Prayers are fed to the individual constantly, like sustenance fed through an IV line, instead of a one gulp of pills from a paper cup. So I think I will end there. I'm happy to take questions, or you can send them to me and I can try to give you a little more detail. But I think that's kind of my beautiful model for what preventative health can look like, and also even treatment health in some cases.
Mashallah. Thank you so much, Mariam. Mashallah, that was amazing. You know, I've always been such a huge fan of medicine being part of our lifestyle and not just taking pills or following down a traditional path, but that our lifestyle really influences our physical well-being. I had never heard about melatonin for children. So that was an interesting comment you made that I think some parents would be delighted to hear. So I will pass that on, that it is actually safe for children. Had I only known that when
Yeah, I probably usually use it from 2 on. Some might use it a little earlier, but
wow,
yeah.
Could you have been around when Ibrahim was little? That would have been so helpful.
But I am a big proponent of sleep hygiene. So even with my kids, I honestly have not used it. I think there's a lot else that often can be done.
There were days that our mental health would have really benefited from a nice dose of melatonin. So mashallah, that's good to hear. But alhamdulillah, that was really great. Does anyone have questions or comments that they'd like to ask or speak? You can unmute yourselves if you'd like to.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Maha. I thought melatonin would stop the production of our natural melatonin in the body, that it was a synthetic way to actually compromise our body's natural way of producing melatonin. Could you clarify?
In all the studies that I've seen, that's not been the case. I think a lot of us are also usually quite depleted in melatonin, and it can be for a number of factors, whether it's like stress, chronic sleep deprivation, even like the lights from our phones and from the environment that we're in. So I've not actually found it to really cause much issue. In some individuals, it has caused sometimes GI effect, but that's pretty rare. Those of us who use it as sort of an immune strategy actually use quite high doses. The cancer literature was like 10 to 20 milligrams a day and higher. For sleep, usually it's really small doses, like anywhere from like 0.1 to 1 milligram or so. In kids, usually we don't go up past like 7 milligrams. But that's interesting. I have not, the literature has not supported that as far as I know. I don't know if Brother Hamza might have something else to add on that, or any other physicians out there.
Sister Sophia asked, which vitamins for stress do you recommend?
Oh, for stress? For stress, vitamins. So magnesium is kind of a huge one that's really depleted in our diets. Probably some of it is related to pesticides, but that is often a really nice supplement for a lot of individuals.
Which type of magnesium?
So that's a good question. A lot of people use magnesium citrate. There's another cool strategy, which I really like, is Epsom salts are a form of magnesium, and you get the benefit of soaking in a tub and relaxing, but you do actually absorb a little bit of that magnesium. And so that's an interesting way to get it too. If you're kind of anxious or not able to sleep, you can sort of take a short bath, which is a nice luxury, but you do get some magnesium there. Anything with the 8s are usually thought to be okay. And I'll just say, like, if you are on medication, just check with a physician, but these are generally strategies that are really safe in the majority of the people. So we use magnesium for depression, anxiety, stress. Vitamin D is a nice one. Most people are low in vitamin D, so supplementing that is really important, even in children. And a lot of doctors will check vitamin D levels, but that can help with stress and also with COVID. The big vitamins with COVID that are recommended are zinc, vitamin D, melatonin is a supplement that's recommended, vitamin C, are the ones that can be very helpful, and studies have shown that can help in viral illness like that.
So proud of me. I take magnesium, vitamin C, and vitamin D every day. Yay. Good for me.
I like a lot of botanicals and herbs too. And I think that's what's really interesting about integrative medicine is that it's evidence-based, and it looks at a lot of the herbs that our families have maybe used for centuries, right? So there's an Indian herb called ashwagandha. It's an adaptogen, and that can be really nice for stress. Very safe to use in the majority of people. I do check all these herbs in my patients and in my family. I do make sure that there's no interactions, and there are really good databases that look at them. But the other one is Tulsi, holy basil, was used in a lot of Ayurvedic cooking and food. That's a neat tea that you can drink, chamomile tea. So there's a lot of nice little strategies that we can use, and most of our cultures have always used these. I think we just now have some, research that can look at that.
Even frankincense, I know is good to add to a supplement. Before we get to some of our speakers, there's a question on the comments that what are the thoughts on fasting during Ramadan and the health benefits? I've heard some scattered thoughts, but nothing from a doctor.
Well, nowadays fasting in general is really often prescribed as a dietary strategy for a lot of illnesses. I know I recently looked at different pain conditions like osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic fatigue syndrome, and fasting is used, sometimes for an 18-hour fast, or there are many different fasting protocols, but I would say it's incredibly healthy. Now, I would say for the majority of people, I'm a pediatrician, so I think I don't know many adult doctors who would really hesitate for the majority of patients as long as their medications are carefully controlled. But I think the science has definitely shown that it has some incredible benefits. And often in short term, like many people fast for a couple of days a week for either 18-hour or 16-hour fast, and they find incredible benefits in how they feel. Even GI syndromes, like if you do it and then you change your diet to like something that's much more clean, to start with a fast is actually really helpful.
Yeah, mashallah. That's great. Dia, did you want to say something? You're muted.
Yeah, I just unmuted. I just wanted to go back to ask you to just elaborate a little bit on meditation and salah, like how different they are, how similarly or differently they affect our brain, and how they complement each other.
Say that again. I missed the first part of what you said.
Meditation and salah, if you can just sort of elaborate a little bit how different and similar they are, how they affect our brain and how they complement each other.
Ooh, I don't know if I could tease out the differences in them. I don't think I talked about this concept of neuroplasticity, which I had been, I think, talking to you about, and I really like. It's a concept that I had not really learned, but it's a science concept about how the brain actually changes in function and structure when we hone in and we support certain functions. So like for the biggest example is like a pianist who would play piano, and she would strengthen those regions of her brain because she was practicing. So meditation has found in studies to show the same effect on our brains. So when we meditate, we enhance those parts of our brains that help us sort of with that parasympathetic drive, that way to kind of control our flight or flight response all the time, to learn better, right? To do all those things better. And so studies have shown that the concept of neuroplasticity is that throughout our lives, we can change the structure of our brain. And I think that is a fascinating concept, because many of us were taught that like, oh, you are what you are, and that person can't change, and that patient is non-compliant, or, whatever. But I think we have really learned that that's not quite true at all. That when we sit, meditate, pray, when we grow those regions of our brains, those will trickle down and they will change the function and structure of our brain. That's how I think of meditation and the power of meditation.
Mashallah. That's amazing. Sophia, I know you had a question or a comment.
I just wanted to add there's some really cool and easy ways to add magnesium through food too. I know avocado and dark chocolate without the sugar part. Anything else you can think of that are high foods for magnesium to help stress level?
Those are great ones. I think also just like nuts, I think have some magnesium. Also greens have some magnesium. Really, the whole food diet is just such a phenomenal diet, right? So now when I go to look for a snack, I think, what's pure in the form that Allah gave it to us, right? Without the packaging, without the processing, without the sugars. And I think all of those foods tend to be really brain supportive. But I think of nuts and greens specifically for what you asked. But I know you're a food guru, so I would definitely trust Sophia's knowledge base on food.
We're in it.
There's also magnesium oils you can use that you can use as skin lotions and things like that. So if you don't have a tub or don't like to soak in a tub and use the Epsom salt, there's magnesium oils that you can use just spray on your body that are also good for absorption. So mashallah, this was amazing. Today was very informative, mashallah. And you know, I think this is one of the things I love about mainline Muslim society is it's not your typical khutbah. It's not your typical Friday Juma. And I think that's the attraction of mainline Muslim society is the spiritual is mixed with practical daily living as opposed to the traditional Juma where it is more of a lecture-based series on different things, for lack of a better word. But mashallah, I really appreciate this style of what I believe Islam to be, a very holistic approach to faith. Islam is not a religion we take once a week. Islam is a religion that you indoctrinate into your life all day, every day. From the way we eat to the way we communicate with one another to our health and our mind. So the way that mainline Muslim society approaches their Jumas in this respect is so appreciated. So Jazakallah khair to the board and the community around us that is encouraging this type of faith-based approach to life, mashallah. So really, Jazakallah khair, we appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Nicole. Just a quick reminder, please fill the surveys and send it back to us. It means a lot for our work. So I just wanted to say that reminder.
And the link is in the chat box. So if anyone needs the link, if you're not on our email list, please go to our website, www.mainlinemuslimsociety.org, or click the link in the chat box. It's also on Facebook and in our WhatsApp group. So no excuse that you can't find the link to the survey. So mashallah, Jazakallah khair to our speakers. Mariam, thank you so much, mashallah, for taking the time out of your, I know, very busy schedule, mashallah, answering all of these questions. Hamza, I know you're not here, but inshallah, you'll see the recording. Thank you, mashallah, for those beautiful reminders about time and community. Don't forget your homework assignments. I will be checking next week. So 3 people that you have not spoken to, inshallah, reach out via text or phone call. It's just so important. My phone number is published all over the place. So if anyone wants to call me, I can be on the list. So no problem, inshallah. Jazakallah khair to all of our newcomers for coming, our old faces, our OGs who have been with us from the beginning, mashallah. We really appreciate you being here and love this growing community. Try to find an hour in the month to donate your time to this beautiful community. It will become all that much richer for your participation. Jazakallah khair, everyone. Make dua for each other. Please make dua for my former mother-in-law. She turned 80 today, mashallah. So this is a beautiful thing. I just spoke with her and she could not have been more tickled to have been celebrating her birthday. So mashallah. Make dua for her. She's a wonderful woman, mashallah, who raised 7 children in a 1-bedroom apartment. How she did it, I have no idea, subhanAllah. So make dua for her. Mashallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of us, keep us safe and healthy. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us between this Jummah and the next, and may He bring us together again next week, inshallah. Ameen. Jazakallah khair, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Nicole.
My pleasure.
So much.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you, Mariam.